Hello, 45 Alpha Charlie Papa Channel, and today we've got a special interview for you. Now, what I've got here is a Norinco Model 97, based off the old Winchester Model 97. And they had a few hiccups getting these guns to market, but there's a lot of misinformation out there, and when I started doing research on this shotgun, one man's name kept popping up, and that name was Coyote Cap. I've been working on trying to get this interview for about a year now. I had a contact who knew Coyote Cap, and I finally was able to get a sit down with him. Now, if you don't know who Coyote Cap is, he's a cowboy action shooter, but he's also an expert cowboy action gunsmith, particularly for the Model 97. So much so that the importer of these shotguns sent him to China, not once, but several times, to work on this gun, to get things smoothed out, to figure out some new features, some safety stuff. But I will let him tell you about that here. So without further ado, here's the one and only Coyote Cap.
What do you got?
I've got a Norinco 97, probably an early model. It's got the Chinese wood.
I can tell what it is. You know what happened if you burn this? It'll kill you.
It'll kill you?
Okay. It'll kill my hat too.
Oh, sorry.
Okay. It'll kill you because it's heavily laden with lead. They'll burn green in a fire. I have in my garage, my old garage, used to park the Cadillac in there. There's boxes full of these. When I realized the Chinese were trying to kill us, I talked to Interstate Arms Company and had them go down to Warsaw, Missouri, talk to Bishop Company, big stock company, and they make furniture, wood and stuff like that, and to ship 35,000 stock blanks to China to replace this crap. That's what it was. And you chip it, and it's just white underneath.
Yeah.
But I should imagine this is it's a Norinco, so it's going to go back to turn of the century.
That was my mom. She used that in cowboy action shooting, and right before she passed, she gave that to me. And
yeah.
I started doing some research on it because I was just going to do a video on that. And,
it's a 2001.
I talked to Granny Annie here, and she said that you had been to the factory. And
yeah, this is a 2001.
2001?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's an 01 serial number on it. That told me when it was made. That's actually when it was stamped. Doesn't mean to say the receiver was made. They could have made it in 1999, 1998, 2000, whatever. But I can see that it was. It's all factory, and it's probably one of the better ones. You can tell that by the tightness of the gun. This is not bad. You have to see some Winchesters go. Unbelievable. If you try the action of this gun and try the action of on this one here and see the difference of it, wherever it's at, here it is. This one.
So this is serial number 1.
Serial number 1, yeah.
12 gauge. It's got a custom stock on it. Very pretty. That is smooth.
Yeah. This is 20 years old, brand new.
Yeah, there's definitely a little bit more resistance there, but
yeah, well, there's no action work done to it.
Yeah, there's
at all. So, this one is got a lot of rounds through it already. You can tell from the forearm being all wore out. You know, from the way I load the gun, I carry 4 cartridges in this hand to pull them out. I have them underneath the forearm, but you start with the action open. Well, I'll drop the first one in, all right? And if I'm shooting 2 rounds, what I'll do is I'll drop it in, close the action, and push it into the magazine as I'm bringing it to my shoulder.
So what prompted you to go over to China to help them or work with these?
I was threatened.
You were threatened?
Yeah. No, it took a couple of years from the talk me to going back to Southeast Asia. I had enough of it in Vietnam, and I didn't care if I ever go back again. but they had some pretty severe problems with the first Model 97s they made in 1998. And what the problem was is that the Chinese, they wanted made them to copy a Winchester, to take a copy of the Winchester. And the problem was is the conversion from their metric machinery that they have, their tooling and their milling machines and things like that are all set up for metric. And now they're supposed to make an American standard, and they had, the only thing they could do was take their calipers and whatever and measure all the parts and try to make the parts, to American standard on metric machines. So that was one of the first problems. All right, but the real problems as they came along was not necessarily the conversion, all right, of metric to standard. That wasn't the real problem, and that is that they shipped over, which you just can't ship over a gun to China if it has to be cut in half, because they won't allow it into the country. Well, this is a special thing from a partner that they had with Norinco, which is Chinese communist. And at that time, Warren Christopher had put a ban on anything made by Norinco Corporation because they were selling nuclear weapons to Iran. They got caught at it. So there was a ban on anything coming from Norinco to the United States. So Interstate Arms Company offered them to buy the factory or through a guy named Randy Mann, and who I think was involved with bringing in ping pong balls and tennis shoes or whatever. I don't remember. It was a long time ago. It was 20-some years ago. So anyway, the problem with it wasn't necessarily the conversion from metric to American standard. All right, that wasn't the problem. The problem is the gun that they thought was a really tight, like your gun is very, very tight. We feel it's a nice tight gun. It moves real fast. Well, if you take a worn out Winchester, when the bolt goes up and down and flaps back and forth, and the hammer has got a lot of wear on top of the hammer right here, that indicates when the bolt goes back, it forces the hammer down and it drags like this. And they think the gun is really tight. Oh, it's a really good gun. What they shipped to China was a worn-out Winchester. So what they did with the first 200 guns, they duplicated worn-out Winchesters. That was the biggest problem they had, and people don't know that. However, the parts themselves, individual parts, wasn't the problem that they had. They had the parts with the hammers and the timing and things like that, and the actual frame itself. The frames were wore out inside. But the parts were good. So I had to take apart those guns and cut the frames in half and send them back to Interstate Arms Company, but I got to keep all the parts. And that's really kind of how I got started in that regard. And that was...
and they interchanged with the Winchesters.
Well, yeah, what happened is that it was too late. They already let one into the country. So what we had to do was to figure out the problems, and I had to go over to China, sit down with the engineers, and determine where the wear problems were with the guns that were wore out. And I explained to them through an interpreter to take the guns that are worn out and reduce the sizes of them to bring everything down to tolerance because you couldn't use metric because metric is oversized. So everything had to be done like that. So the decision was made to go metric. And that was in 1991, which is what your gun is. It's metric.
It's metric, okay.
That's metric, not a standard. Now, the early ones, like I said, they were handmade. The first 200 handmade, worn-out Winchesters, were American standard. So now all of those parts were used over a long period of time to repair old worn-out Winchesters because the parts were good.
Yeah.
But the frames were wore out. So we found that out. But anyway, that's another story. But to answer your question, how did they get me to go over to China the first time? Well, like I said, I was jokingly said that they threatened me. And it took a lot of phone calls back and forth from Billerica to Minnesota where I lived and to convince me, to go to China. And finally what it got down to, it was like a financial thing, but it wasn't. I wanted something to honor my dad. My dad was a master gunsmith. He made over 400 guns. As a matter of fact, you see a lot of the Weatherby guns that are out right now. My dad did the design, and Weatherby stole them. You hear that? That's a fact. Look it up on the internet. You look at the guns that John Wayne is holding, and you look at one of my dad's guns from 5 to 10 years prior to that, and it's identical.
And your dad's name?
Was Cap, Coyote Cap.
Coyote Cap.
He was known as Coyote Cap as a cowboy in rodeos, and my mom was a buckle bunny.
Okay.
And that's if anybody knows what a buckle bunny is, and she was out to get my dad in at the rodeo, and that's how it started everything back in the early 30s. So that was a long time ago, but Dad got busted up on a bronc so bad first time, and the second time, Mom said, "Look, you gotta quit rodeoing." I mean, he still wanted to rodeo anyway, so he got on a Brahma bull, and it tossed him over, and he rolled over backwards and crushed his chest. Well, that took him out of rodeoing, so he went home and was to make some money. He started whittling gun stocks and stuff like that, and he got pretty good at it. As a matter of fact, so good that a guy from Prescott, Arizona, his name was Harold E. McFarland. Harold E. McFarland wrote a book called Gunsmithing Simplified. And my dad wrote the whole entire chapter on making stocks and how to fit the stocks and things like that. They were so accurate. Dad's work was so accurate. He used to wear a French beret because he said it was a sign of an artiste, you know. Well, to make a long story, how that comes over to me and why I did what I did was that when Dad got started, and he wrote about this, all of those guns in his work showed up in that book. You're talking about back in the 50s, before Weatherby even got a good start. Mm-hmm. And he showed up at the shop one day, and the dog didn't like him, and Dad threw him out of the shop. I was there, so I know what happened. Wow. Poor Roy, he died in '88, so maybe he can't sit there and defend himself, so I better not say any more about that. His sons will probably come over and shoot me.
When you got to China, what were the conditions, or how did you get the...
Well, how they talked me into doing it, and that was I made a deal with them. And what you see, a lot of these guns that came out had Dad's name engraved inside of the Model 97. This is the cowboy model. That's the only ones that don't, because I didn't have a contract on that. But this other gun, as you see, has got my dad's name in gold, mm-hmm. engraved in the side of the frame. I mean, the only people do this is Winchesters and Brownings and Rugers and, you know, anybody else, and nobody has their father's name engraved inside of a gun. My good, and thousands of them. Yeah. So this was part of the deal. That's what got me to go over. I said, I made a deal. If you make some guns honoring my dad's name, okay, for posterity, then I'll go once. Okay, we'll have a look. Well, one problem came to another, and then the second time I had to go to cure another problem with a new gun they had called a Model 99 double barrel with hammers. And I was thinking, what happened was in that gun, they were firing the cartridges, which are Chinese, which are metric, and in a 12 gauge. Well, anybody who knows anything about metrics knows that between a 12 millimeter and a 13 millimeter and a half, there's a big difference. So the cartridges, when they got him into the gun and they fired, they couldn't get him out. They had to bruise the rod and bang him out the barrel, get the cartridges out. And I thought about this. I said, they thought it was a huge problem. Oh, terrible problem. I said, ain't no problem. I said, yeah, it is. No, it ain't. No, it ain't. All those guns are hammered coach guns. They're going to cowboy action shooting, black powder shooters. So, well, we got here is, 2 5/8 inch chambers or 2 3/4 inch chambers. Let's make them, 2 9/16 or 2 15 30 seconds or whatever the size of the Chinese reaming tools are. Mm-hmm. Let's ream them all out for Chinese ammunition, because black powder cartridges will fall right out of them. And that's exactly what happened. There's not a one of people that bought these guns have no idea that it's a 12 gauge. It's an 11 7/8 gauge. So, and really, it is something I'm kind of proud of. But there's a lot of guys who just love those shotguns because they just don't fail on them. They just never done so well. But anyway, the first problems which would cure obviously the major problem like that. The second problem that I went over there for was a serious one, where people didn't understand the failure systems of the Model 97. And it was a dangerous gun. They thought the that the old Marlin was what they called a Widowmaker. No, it was a Model 97. And what the Model 97 had was a serious problem, and that I had to cure that. And I'll go ahead and explain this to you with this one here. And that is that the Model 97, as it came out, the original ones had a very long, heavy firing pin. Now, the one that John Browning made was called the Model 93, as like your gun, has a spring in front of it. See, you can't hardly see the firing pin there. Mm-hmm. It's literally disappeared. You can't. Now, on Winchester, they stick out quite a ways because they're a lot longer. What happened was, back at the turn of the century, what they had was steel primers. They didn't have brass primers back then. It wasn't until after the turn of the century, 1912 or 13, something like that, where Winchester went to brass primers. But before that, they made an awful lot of Model 97s with these real long firing pins in them that you had to really smack them hard to make them go off. See? So they had a lot of misfires. And the problem with that is very, very simple. And we call it a drop test. So that when Grandpa's out in the 1930s with his, 20, 30, 40, 50-year-old Model 97, and he's got it loaded up in the magazine, and he's got a live round in the chamber, and he puts it on safety. It's on safety right now, okay? The action camp will open up, he got it, and then we're getting ready to go. He pulls the hammer back, and he shoots the duck, right? So he's got it on safety, and he's just raining out, or it's a duck blind, or whatever. He's crossing over a fence. He gets halfway over the fence, he's going to set his gun down. Boom! The gun fires. Blows half his face off, or puts right into his chest or whatever. Or if it does it in his car, sets down his car, will shoot a hole through the roof of his car. All right, what caused that? It's called a drop test. All right, for every action is an equal opposite reaction. That heavy firing pin, because it was on safety, the gun can't fire because it's on safety, except that firing pin is exposed and so heavy that the sudden drop would set off a brass primer. Not a steel primer, set them off. And Winchester never corrected that problem till I came along. There's not a single, I told them, I don't want any involvement because you can get sued. If you guys want to get sued, you better continue like this. So a lot of guns still in SAS and still being shot, still have those old firing pins. And I warned SAS about it. I warned all the territorial governors about this. It's like, nobody ever has any problems with them. Oh, they're just fine. I said, well, because you're single shot reloading. You're single shot loading, and probably you're okay in that regard. But just don't have it loaded with it on safety and cross over a fence. Right? You're taking your life in your hand. So I redesigned the firing pin 4 different times. If you took the firing pin out of there, you find it's really, really light and too short to fire the gun. Literally, the firing pin can't be seen in the front and can't be seen in the back. Okay,
there's momentum and inertia that
it's got a spring in front of it, what John Browning had in the first Model 93s. That's why I go back to what John Browning was a genius, not me. When he made the design, I went back to that design, but I lightened the firing pin and shortened it a great deal. And all we did was change the mainspring a lot, and the sear and things like that. I did those changes so that when the gun is fully cocked, it cannot fire by dropping the hammer. It doesn't have the inertia to go boom forward and fire the gun. It can't. You have to deliberately have it all the way back and deliberately pull the trigger. Now, if you got it all the way back and you start to open the action a little bit, like this, see, so it decocks the trigger. The trigger cannot be pulled until the carrier is up and locked behind the bolt, and the gun then can be pulled. It's an adjustment behind the trigger in the backside. There's a lot of changes that were made for safety items where I didn't want to see us ever get sued for something I knew better.
Yeah. Just
knew better. It was the way to do this. So the other thing, we had a lockup problem. And I actually have a video of that from 2014. When the cowboy guns came out, they were really, really great guns, but every now and then one would lock up and you just could not get the darn thing open until you took a hammer in the back here and popped the back of the hammer when she went forward. I realized they had used up all of their parts. The Chinese don't throw nothing away. No. Let me tell you. Okay, they used up all of their sears and the hook was called a hook that goes in the back side of the slide rod. goes into a hook mechanism, it fits into the hook like this. So they were using those early Winchester ones were worn out and putting them in brand new guns. So what happened, they were disconnecting, all right, and then locking the guns up. So I had to go back to the engineers with my interpreter and explain to them, don't do that again, okay? And it's actually a really neat 5-minute video of that, and I'm quite proud of that. That was my last trip to China, and they knew and understand what was going on in that regard. But the other changes just to the 97 were, it would take an hour for me to tell you every change that I made inside them. So many changes were done, from magazine tubes to the size of the barrel, to the chambers, to the thickness of the barrels, choke tubes, recoil patch, angle of what's called the angle of attack, which is the angle of the buttstock, so that when you put it to your shoulder like this, close your eyes and lean to your shoulder, open your eye, and you're looking right down the barrel. That's being able to shoot the gun in the dark. Mm-hmm. So I had them change that from the Winchester design to drop the comb on it, just slightly. Same way with your 87s and your 97s. The 87 is very similar to that, and that is when you put it to your shoulder, you rack it open, close your eyes, put it shoulder, and you're looking right down the barrel. Try it yourself.
Sure.
Okay? Just throw it up in any type of angle. Just making sure you've got a short neck or whatever. Just throw it, close your eyes, throw the gun to your shoulder. Where are you looking?
Right down the barrel?
Right down the bore. That means that if there's anything in front of you, it's the middle of the night, and you want to protect your home, whatever's in front there with a short barrel like that, it's like a blunderbuss. It's called 730. It's a cylinder style. It's just really wide, 18 to 22 inch pattern at 25 feet. That's like,
yeah,
whatever's in front of you is going down, right? It'll be all over. So, but there's a lot of other inventions that are inside the guns that it takes too long to just mention what they are. But one of them was the two-shot feeding system. You can push the carrier down like this, and it stops. And you can put 2 cartridges in at once, like that. Like that. That's how it's done. And that's a patented design, by the way. Nobody can design it. Even Chiappa tried. They came with something different entirely, and I don't know, whatever.
Now,
but
they stopped importing the Norinco shotguns, didn't they? Or
what's that?
The 97s? Did they stop importing these, or?
They did until they sold out a lot of the stuff. The factory, which was Shandong #1 factory, which did all the high machining and stuff like that. Shandong #2 did all the buttstocks and so on. They moved everything over to the Sun plant when Randy took over the company there, and Interstate Arms Company was involved with that. The Chinese Communist Party was out of it. They were banned, so Interstate Arms Company took over all of the importation of the guns, labeled as a IAC. Well, your gun, you notice it has Norinco on it, but if you look on the other side of the barrel, it should say over here, IAC, Billerica, Massachusetts, on the other side of the barrel. That's how they got to use up the old barrels. The last of the barrels they had, either that or they had to polish them off and reblue them again, but they didn't want to do that because they wanted to make them as cheap as they possibly could.
Bringing them in, but there's just not under the Norinco name anymore? Or?
That's it. As of 2001, the Norinco name disappeared.
Okay.
They're all called IAC.
You go to Century Arms, you can find those under the Norinco. And maybe they're just old stock. What
do you mean, Century Arms?
Yeah.
Yeah, Century Arms is CAI, all right, or IAC.
Yeah.
They've tried to do this, picking up on the notoriety, because everybody goes, oh, the IAC, that's a good gun. Well, this is a CAI. Oh, same company, all right? Okay, whatever. But no, they then used up, as far as I've seen, I looked at a lot of them, and they got little pock marks in the frames, where they were defective frames, a lot of leftover parts. I wonder what happened to all those parts when I went back there, and they just kind of disappeared. So they sold them off to CAI, Century Arms Incorporated, to manufacture the guns and put them out in the market again. But a lot of them didn't work. A lot of them jammed. A lot of them are old parts, and I don't know anything more about it than that, other than what I've taken apart physically to repair with IAC parts in the CAI to make the dang gun work. And then I retired, and I said, okay, well, there you go.
Because I know when I was looking at these, and I noticed that there was a change in the importation of shotguns. And I was just wondering why I wasn't seeing this one anymore. I was finding that one, but I wasn't seeing the 97s.
Yeah.
And I know that the version of this that has the heat shield and the bayonet lug can't be imported anymore. It was part of one of the rules that came through.
Well, I had a lot to do with that too. I said the ability to manufacture and sell a trench gun would be an absolute rocket boom to any of the guys that served in World War I or Korea or Vietnam. Because if they had one, which would have been a Mossberg or a Remington or whatever, or a Winchester, and almost all of them were with the non-takedown models, with the heat shroud on them. I said, if you ever decide to do this again, okay, I highly recommend you do that, because you'll sell them all out within weeks. They'll be gone.
Yeah.
All your veterans are going to grab one because they haven't seen one since Nam. And I was right.
Yeah.
So anybody that has an IAC trench gun right now, hang on to it. Okay, because there aren't anymore.
There aren't anymore.
Yeah, they stopped that, and darn federal government gets involved with it again.
And you were talking about the metal on these. It's stronger than.
Oh yeah. White Laboratories proved that. They proved that the metallurgy is not like an AK-40. AK-47s are stamped. These are actually machined out of block of steel, and like a forged thing, not a casting. They did a lot of the first ones in investment casting, and they had problems with them. Real problems. They didn't get it right. They didn't have enough antimony in the mixture they had. They wound up with holes all over them, and they had to weld them up. And then you try to blue them, and they would turn red and blue. The spots would show up blue, but the whole rest of the gun was red. So they said, "Oh God, what are we going to do with it?" And they won't throw them away. They just kept at them, kept bluing them and bluing and bluing and bluing until they finally got them to be black, not blue, black. If you look at this, they're all black. It's not really a blue. It's black because they changed that, and that took a little bit of doing, by the way. The bluing salts and the mixtures and stuff like that were sent over from Birchwood Casey to China. I mean, I saw 50-gallon drums of it. So what they were doing, hodgepodge mixing, I don't know what happened, but that's how the actually almost indestructible the finish is. You don't see very many IACs with rust on them. I think that's just one of the nice things. But the metallurgy itself is far superior than anything we've got, like they're made out of Russian tanks or something. But they are so strong. One of the things that is important to understand on the Model 97, especially if you own a Winchester, when you take it apart, don't mess around with the shell flag. All right, that's one of the problems they had with the what's this, 1901 down 7150. One of the things you don't want to mess with is what's called the shell flag. That's this device right here on the side. You close it right there. Okay, you can push it down. All right. And it goes down because it's only under inertia, or friction. So you can go back and forth, and you can see it doesn't move up and down. It doesn't move until you get it all the way back. The carrier goes up. Now it's got a friction spring inside of here that holds it in the up position. And what that's supposed to be for is to keep the cartridge from coming out of the gun.
When it's loading it?
That's a fact. So if you had one that you took apart and you made the mistake of knocking out that rivet that holds that compression spring in place, and all of a sudden your shell flag doesn't work anymore, it doesn't come up, you can blow up. Your Winchester will actually blow up. You can't blow up an IAC. But what will happen here is the cartridge, because the shell flag's not up to stop the cartridge from jumping out, all right, the brass portion is lighter than the lead portion. And it'll come up and it'll hit the carrier, which is a V situation, and spin on the carrier. The rounded inside of the Model 97, not the Model 93, it was flat. Model 93 didn't have this problem. But the 97, to cut down the weight, they machined it all out. Well, as the cartridge would come out of the magazine and flip it up with the carrier, the shell flag's not down, the cartridge would drop to the left and get caught in the left extractor guide, and boom, and instead of going into the chamber, it go boom sideways like this. All right. So as you close the action, if you don't realize it's not in the chamber. If you look where the right extractor is, and it comes out, it's right in line
with that extractor.
with the primer, with the primer, and it'll puncture the primer and fire the cartridge that's sitting sideways. The shot and wad never go down the barrel. The recoil will be horrendous, and the Winchester will split the frame right here. I've had them do this on IACs because people took them apart and didn't realize what they were doing when they put it back together. It's a dangerous thing to do. It has to work. But I've seen them. It doesn't hurt a 97, an IAC at all. I mean, you can get away with it. Whoever's standing alongside of it probably won't, because all that brass comes flying sideways. But that's a common situation in cowboy action shooting, when people don't realize that that thing's got to work. It's just got to work. Other thing we did a timing change on them, and what that meant was to change the timing of the carrier coming up. I was having to come up a little bit earlier, but the shell flag was already in place. But as the bolt comes back over the top, to stop the cartridge from getting behind the ejector. The ejector spring is right here, and what will happen is the cartridge can spin like this, and the shell flag will hold it, but it'll flip it up behind, not in front of the ejector, but behind it. You try to close the action, and the rim of the cartridge is behind the ejector, and you snap the ejector and off, and you're done. Until you get another ejector. That's why people were buying ejectors like they were chocolate, because the Winchesters are notorious for that. So what we did, I went back to China again, and we redesigned myself and the engineers, it's a set of ramps in there. And those ramps are based upon the bottom half of the bolt. When the bolt comes back, it'll hit those ramps, all right? And what it'll do is it'll change the timing of the carrier when it comes up, so that it can't possibly, if the bolt's further forward, it's in front of the ejector, so we can't break the ejector anymore. So now when you load it sideways, that's your problem. If it's all the way back, you can if you lay the gun sideways like this, you run the risk of the rim going behind the ejector, but not in the fact of the cowboys that are shooting wild bunch, that'll load 6 into there and hold the trigger down like that and fire 6 rounds in 2.5 seconds. So that's not a problem with an IAC. It is with a Winchester. But the other thing is, if you load a single shot, that is a problem. I load over the top like that, like that. Not that fast, because I'm not that fast. I mean, my son will do that, But most of the other guys, like Robin DeWalt and Hell's Coming and other really top fast shooters, they'll hold 2 in this hand like this, and they go from their belt, and they'll just drop one in and fire with their middle finger like this. Right? They have a cartridge here. They drop the first one in from their bottom fingers. This goes down to the trigger. You fire it forward, drop the other one in, and fire it. Boom, boom, like that. And that is no problem, because you already got the barrel slightly down. Which, when you lay it up like this, that's when you run a pop. If you run the barrel and up like that, it's not a good thing to do. You gotta have it down so it goes that way.
Let gravity work.
Yeah. So those are problems that cannot be cured because it's a shooting style. I'm a big offender of that. I just fumbleitis with a double barrel. The 87, I'm not bad with that, but I don't know. I just like a 97. 97 guy. Everybody knows that. So
I'm just happy that I was able to have this for my mom, and I'll be able to shoot it this weekend and use it. It's nice to know a little bit more about it, and the guy that went over to China to help them perfect it, work on it.
Oh yeah.
Make it safer for us.
I see you got a sheepskin over it.
Yeah,
There's a little story behind that. I built 4 or 5 Model 87s, short, stubby 87s with a big loop on them like that, and it had a sheepskin forearm and a sheepskin lever and a sheepskin butts up. You know where that came from? Okay, the guy named Shorty in the movie Monty Walsh.
Okay.
Okay, And I built some, mostly for deputy sheriff. One was in Brown County. If you ever see these things, there's a deputy sheriff's in Brown County, Arizona, Florida, and he's got one of them. It's one of those, I think he keeps it in his squad car. He brings it up. He calls it his street sweeper. He brings it out, levers his shotgun. It gets people's attention.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of neat. But I only built, I don't know, 4 or 5. I got to remember. Yeah, five of them. It's been a long time, but there's like 5,000 of my guns out there someplace in the country. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
But that's 20 years of work. And the number of times that I went to China was specific to do a specific problem or design, like the 93, 97, the 97s twice, the 99 double barrel, the 87, and then of course the 1901 prototypes. Those and the 87 were done at the same time. And how that came to be was, well, the guy that was involved, he was with Wild Bunch then, he didn't like the idea of having a 1901 12 gauge gun that never existed, because the rules state they had to be from 1855 to 1900, not 1901. So he wanted the gun banned. Well, Interstate Arms got annoyed at that, and it would work because it was made for longer cartridges, the 10 gauge. So why not make a 12 gauge out of what should have been a 10 gauge? Mm-hmm. That was a good idea, but it didn't meet very well with the Wild Bunch at that time, or that particular guy.
Right.
He's gone now, but anyway, so those got shelved for many years. They sat in Billerica, and on the last trip to China, or the second to last trip, I asked Marty, who's passed now, the president, what's he going to do with those old prototypes he had up there? He said, I don't know. A gun that never existed, you know. I said, hey, you know what? You guys owe me a bit of money from the last trip, you know, some expenses and stuff like that. And he said, well, you want the guns? I said, yeah, I'll take them. I'll do something with them. So I decided at that time that the gun that, the largest cartridge that Winchester ever made is at the top of the Winchester board. And right at the top, it's called a 7150, 70 caliber, 150 grains of FFG. And you can read about it in all sorts of books, you know, that have got the explanation of what that gun was. It never made it to production, obviously, until I came along. I said, that's an idea I want to do with those things. That's an elephant gun and a half, 900 grains bullet. I mean, wow. Good grief. So I acquired all of them, and they're sitting in my vault yet back in Minnesota. One of these days, I'm going to decide what I'm going to do with all those guns, and because it's so rare. They're just a rare gun. It's like I was showing you from the front. There's my son. Yeah, it was
one officer.
Right, yeah, this Muggy on Drifter, his name was, on SAS, and he did all the laser engraving for many years on a lot of cowboy guns. And the only thing I did was just all the action work inside and stuff. He never got involved with that at all. But
a lot of nice jeweling on the action.
That's common. I do that almost to all of them. Other than my own, you notice there's no action, there's no jeweling on my own gun because it's right out of the box. The only thing I did was lighten the mainspring on it and shot it for several years now. This is my main match gun, unmodified. And that's the durability of the Cowboy 97. And it's been a good gun ever since. The only thing I did was put dad stocks on it. You know, that's nostalgia sort of thing. And there you go. But this was a big deal. Someday, somebody's going to say, you know what? Nobody had the idea to do this for 125 years. But it took a little bit of talking to get them to agree to put Dad's name in the side of them. And that's how they got me to go to China.
That's how they got you to China.
Yeah. Okay. Right. What else you got to know?
I think that covers everything on the 97 that I think we'd like
well, the
to
97,
know.
Yeah, there's a lot.
And a little bit of the other ones. So thank you. This is 45 Alpha Charlie Papa channel. Please like, subscribe. And thank you, Coyote Cap.
Oh, you're welcome. You're welcome.
I appreciate it greatly. And Granny Annie for introducing you.
My friends for like 20 years, you know. Yeah, they'll take anybody in. Even a guy that lives in a Walmart shopping cart. I got everything I own in my shopping cart, and they felt bad for me.
They felt bad.
Oh yeah, they took me and let me feed me anything I want, and yeah, okay, Hoss, all right, okay.
All right. Thank you very much.
I got to get even with them because they let me stay in the back of their nice that they used to have. Then they sold the darn thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now I'll get even with them, but I'll make them stay in mine. But anyway, thank you very much. I didn't expect to have an interview like this, mainly because there's a little hiatus over the publishing of the 93, 97. That's the 90. I'm sorry, the 7150 to market the gun within the next few years. But I've already talked to a couple of other guys that wanted to do an interview of that gun. And one of them is a writer for National Rifleman magazine. And he said, this is unusual. Nobody's ever done anything like that. It's like a one-off. But that was my dad too. He was called a wildcatter. He was making these crazy cartridges.
Yeah.
Oh God! I can remember
Keith and them. All these blowing guns up to see what would happen.
Well, he had his quality control. He had his way of making quality control. He had a sense of humor too. My dad did, by golly. But he would have me sitting in the back, carefully loading, 270 cartridges or whatever it was. He had a wildcat load in this for old Little Poison. He called his rifle his 270, custom-made 270. He would have me load one cartridge at a time, very, very carefully. And I can do right to 57 grains of 4350. Anybody does shoot 4350, you can do this. All right, 57 grains, not 57 and 1/2. The little itty bitty thing you can cut them in half with a knife. I mean, unbelievable. That's how accurate he wanted them done. So he had made me make 21 of them in a box, brand new box, and I had to polish every one of them just perfect like this with a 110 grain Sierra hollow point, by the way. 57 grains is right full of the top of the case, and you pressed it in. Well, that's a lot. And the recoil was unreal. 3,750 feet a second was the velocity of this thing has. Anyway, I'd make 21 cartridges, right? I put the last one on top of the box. And Dad would take the customer's rifle, he'd put it onto the rest, and out there, like 400 yards away, there's this great big rock out there. Okay, he's going to shoot this great big rock. And then he's got another target at about 200 yards away. Well, first of all, he's going to find out if this thing's even going to shoot, So what he would do, take that cartridge off the top of the box and set it aside. And he'd go inside the box. Eeny, meeny, miny, I think this one. He'd take one out of the box, throw it in the rifle, slam the bolt shut, put it there, and that thing had better group 1 inch at 200 yards. What the hell did you do with this guy? You get it, do them all over again. That's one. It's not whether he missed the damn thing or deliberately missed it, whatever. But he wanted me to understand that quality is everything, and it's not quantity; it's quality. When Dad made a rifle, which I've got it in the actual the last one Dad made before he died is in there. It's an absolute gorgeous piece of machinery. But if you looked at the stock of this thing, and it's a Mannlicher barrel on it, and it goes all the way to the end. All right.
Those are beautiful.
Yeah, and it's not. There's no Brownells Acrorize or Acroglass, put around the barrel to put it in. Dad would work the stock so that when you put the barrel in, the wood would spread and snap the barrel. It was that close. Prussian blue is what he did. He kept carefully getting it out, and he would have me carefully shave it out with a special tool. Every time I snap it in Prussian blue, get the Prussian blue until I got it. I said, so I'd get going on that thing, and he'd say, "No, you got to do it this way. No, don't do it that way. No. Damn it, you did it again." That's how I learned, But what he did, one day, he come around after he was had one of his too many cups of coffee, I think, went around the corner, and I'm carefully loading. I've got the press going really, really careful and making sure I'm measuring the powder like this. And a cherry bomb, he lit it and threw it underneath my chair. He says, I come 2 feet off that chair. So boom, this thing goes up. That was his sense of humor. And he just sat back and laughed like that. But Dad was, he was tough, well respected because of the artistry that he did. Mm-hmm. And he needed somebody to do the best to honor him. And that's all this is about, is to honor Dad. Nothing to do with me, because Dad's name in rodeos was Coyote Cap. I didn't know that until my mom gave me a card, and it's got Dad's picture on it, and on the back of it, he wrote Coyote Cap. That was his rodeo name from the 1930s. She said, "Yep, you can use it in cowboy shooting." So that's how that came about. But thank you for asking me all these questions.
Thank you.
All right.